Welcome to IVF This, episode 89, Time Scarcity. Welcome to IVF This. I'm your host, Emily Ginn. After 10 years of primary and secondary infertility due to both male and female factor infertility, I am now the mother to 3 beautiful miracles. I am married to my favorite person in the world. I'm a social worker, a life coach, and an IVF warrior. I'm here to teach you how to manage your mind and emotions during your IVF journey, to break free from anxiety and regain control of your life, even in the midst of infertility. I'm going to teach you how to say IVF this to how we think about, talk about, and experience infertility. Let's go. Hello, my beautiful friends. I hope you are all doing so well. I want to start this episode by telling you how my morning went. Now, trigger warning, I will be talking a little bit about my kiddos and the morning routine, so if that's not something you really want to hear, totally fine. Skip ahead a minute or so and you'll be all set. So today, as I'm writing and recording this episode, my husband took a 6:30 a.m. flight to Atlanta for a conference. Now, we can feel a little bit bad for him because he had to be up at 4:15 and get ready and head to the airport. That's not really my idea of a lot of fun, but that means that I'm doing a lot of the solo parenting stuff and getting everyone up and out the door for the day. So I get up around 5:45 to get myself ready-ish, mostly just changing out of my pajamas and washing my face. And then I start getting everything ready for the day, which means breakfast for the kiddos, getting them changed, ready, backpacks packed, bottles for the baby, all of that stuff, right? There's a lot to do in a really specific amount of time. Now, this was a great morning. I had a really good amount of cooperation from the boys. Things seemed to really fall in line really well. We left exactly when we needed to make sure that everybody got to school on time. Now, when I think about last Thursday, it was an almost identical situation. My husband was again out of town, and yet the whole morning played out so differently. I didn't get out of bed until like 6:10, and then I was scrambling around the entire time, and I kept telling myself, there's not enough time. Entire time scarcity. That's what time scarcity looks like. And of course, during this time, because I felt so out of control, so dysregulated, I was snapping at everyone, heavy sighs, harsh or sharp tones, a little bit of yelling. Like, this was not my finest moment. Okay? There is not enough time is one of the most prevailing thoughts that contribute to time scarcity. So let us start by understanding what time scarcity or scarcity is. So a scarcity mindset is when you are so obsessed with the lack of something, usually time or money, those are typically the biggest culprits, that you can't seem to focus on anything else, no matter how hard you try. So let's level set. Scarcity is a big thing in the infertility community. Time, money, children. So much of what we experience is based in scarcity. Now, over the course of the next few months, I'm going to do a podcast episode about all 3 of the big infertility scarcity mindsets, but I thought I would ease you all into understanding scarcity by talking about time scarcity. Now, it's important to understand scarcity is not something that you're doing on purpose. I want you to think of it as background noise in your brain, which is also known as unconscious automatic thoughts, that tell you you cannot do X, Y, or Z, which is usually something you want. Like, you can't get X, Y, or Z. And that usually is something you want. For time scarcity, it's like time is constantly running out, so you won't be able to get what you want. For me, it usually comes up when I think I'm running late. I want to be on time. And maybe I will be on time, but my brain is so hyped up that I can't even settle down or relax into the belief, hey, you're okay. Or it's that I have someplace to be at a certain time and I'll arrive to that place after that specified time. For many of us in the infertility community, time scarcity comes up in a couple of different ways. One is the belief that this is taking too long. Oof. I'm like a master of this thought. I don't want to brag or anything, but this thought has been a buddy of mine for a very long time. And what's really important to know and understand is while I thought that this thought was really specific to how long it took to get pregnant, start a cycle, get a referral, or have kids, I have literally had this thought throughout pretty much every aspect of my life, and I would wager money, so have you. It took too long for my husband to propose. I know he loves that one. It took too long for us to get married. It took too long for me to get my undergrad or my graduate school completed. It took too long for me to start getting promotions and moving up in the corporate ladder. It took too long for me to start my business. It took too long for me to get regular clients. And now I have this thought related to other aspects of my life and business. So it didn't just magically go away because I got my kids. The second way this comes up for us is I'm running out of time. Now, I would be completely remiss if I did not acknowledge the biological reality of people with ovaries and uteruses. There is a specific clock on how many eggs that remain and their typical diminishing quality. Now, I say typical because not everyone experiences that, but some of us do. Our egg quantity and the quality, medically speaking, are designed to reduce over time. Our eggs, or more accurately, our follicles, are a non-renewable resource, meaning we are born with however many eggs we will have for the rest of our lives, which is usually around 1 million-ish. These are ranges, folks, ranges. By the time we hit puberty, only about 300,000 on average remain. Of those, only about 300 to 400 will be ovulated during our reproductive lifetime. Now, I am not sharing these particular statistics with you to exacerbate your scarcity, but we want to be really honest about what we're talking about. This is a reality, and we want to acknowledge and honor that. Now, I've mentioned there's not enough time at the top of this episode. This is really pervasive, typically outside of the context of infertility. It's not that I'm not acknowledging when it comes up or how it comes up, but I think it's just really important to focus on the other two big ones. But what I am going to share, I think, will help you put into context and manage your mind around that particular thought too, so do not fear. Now, when we have these thoughts, that creates scarcity for us. I don't think, unless you're in coaching or therapy, you would likely categorize it as scarcity. I think for most of us, when we think these thoughts, the feeling that comes up are typically like anxiety or urgency. At least that's what is usually created for me. And since I have a human brain and you have a human brain, it's a pretty educated guess. The emotion that I want to talk about today is urgency. Anxiety gets a lot of airtime on this podcast, but I don't really think I've spent much time talking about urgency. And I want you to take a quick second and think about how urgency, that feeling of urgency, feels in your body. It might feel very similar to anxiety, which is why it can be hard to differentiate the two. For me, it tends to feel like anxiety, and it also kind of feels like there's this invisible force pulling or pushing me forward. And I don't really feel like I have a choice but to move. But it's not really a comfortable feeling. It still feels very much like I am out of control. This is incredibly normal. One of the biggest, let's say, unintended consequences of scarcity mindset is that it lowers your impulse control capability, which is why when you're feeling urgent or anxious, you tend to snap at the people around you. I don't know if you've ever been so riled up about something and feeling a very strong sense of urgency and you're trying to close a drawer or put something up, but it won't close because there's things in the way or that thing keeps falling. And so you end up throwing a huge temper tantrum. Yeah, me too. Me too. Just the other day. That sense of urgency, the actions that you take from that emotion will always be frantic, almost like you're scrambling, right? That is just how the think, feel, do cycle works. Even outside of these two big scarcity thoughts that we're talking about, I'm willing to bet that sense of urgency, anxiety comes up for you a lot. That's where the there's not enough time usually comes in. Because our brains have difficulty prioritizing, everything seems to have the same level of urgency when you're in that mindset. The dishes and taking your IVF medications at the specified time might carry the same urgency, the same weight. But it all relates back to your relationship with time. The reason that I want to highlight urgency is because that feeling of urgency is like a huge red flag for me. I will always be on the lookout for that feeling or thoughts that could create that feeling, because that tells me that you believe that you will get to feel better on the other side of that thing, right? Like once I'm done, once this is checked off the list, then I will get to feel better. Whatever better is for you, relaxed, complete, calm, secure, settled. There's probably a dozen of emotions that we could identify that we think that we'll get to feel once that thing has been checked off our list. One of the biggest things that I hear, particularly as it relates to this is taking too long, is that once that person gets pregnant or has the baby, they'll get to feel like their life has started. I actually had one of my very beautiful clients talk about this just a few days ago. Those were her exact words too. I will get to feel like my life has started. She's anticipating a transfer cycle, and that's what we were kind of talking about. So that is the feeling that she is chasing. And I want to make sure that this is really understood. That sense of urgency, that feeling of urgency, what you're doing is chasing a feeling. Again, because you believe, just like she did, that she will get to feel better on the other side of pregnancy, on the other side of her transfer. So this is the part of the episode where I get to be Debbie Downer. Wah, wah. Chasing a feeling never yields long-term satisfaction, because then you will just continue to chase that feeling. Because my client and many of you, let's be honest, the vast majority of the world's population believe that external circumstances create our feelings. They stay on this emotional and mental treadmill, always chasing a feeling. Newsflash, spoiler alert, your thoughts always create your feelings. We'll get back to that. So let's take doing the dishes. I know that I like to have a clean sink and have it be empty. When my sink is clean and empty, I have the thoughts, wow, my house feels clean. It could be an absolute disaster area otherwise, but if the sink is clean and empty, that's my immediate thought. But you know what? Those dishes will inevitably reappear in the sink at some point. So that feeling is fleeting. For my client, as we talked, she started to realize that that thought, after this, then my life will get to start, has actually been with her for a very long time. She immediately thought back to when she was planning her wedding and getting married. She was so eager and excited to get married because one of the many thoughts she had was, after this, then my life will start. As we dug a little bit deeper, that thought has actually popped up in pretty much every aspect of major life events for her. High school graduation, going to college, graduating from college, starting her professional career, getting engaged, getting married, buy a house. And now it was time for a baby. So one of the big things that we had to do to see that it was not really a question of her life actually starting, but her beliefs around it, was to untangle, one, was what all of those other life events were and how that thought kept popping up, and two, how it wasn't necessarily better on the other side. You probably all know this cliche, the grass is greener on the other side. I call BS. It's the same grass. Grass is grass. Grass that is tended to looks greener, but it still requires work. So it's not that the grass is better or greener, it's that the process for upkeep is different. Not better, just different. I want you all to really, really hear me. It's not better, it's different. Getting to the point where you're doing fertility treatment is not better than it was before you got to that point. It's just different. Before fertility treatments, you might have felt kind of stuck. So once you start treatment, you might get to feel excitement or like you're making progress. But then your body is under a microscope. You'll have all new thoughts to occupy your time, like all of the logistics that are required during an IVF cycle, medications, appointments, all of that. It's not better, it's just different. Getting pregnant is not better than it was before. When you get pregnant and as you progress through pregnancy, it's not as if you take some sort of magic cocktail and all of your worries and cares are behind you. That is a lie that we tell ourselves. You will still have worries. You will still symptom spot like a detective. You will still hold your breath before every ultrasound or test. You will still think about everything you're putting in your body and how everything that you're doing is impacting your body and that little creature inside. This doesn't mean you're doing something wrong or that there's something wrong with you. It means you're human. The lie that we tell ourselves, and usually what creates a lot of suffering for us when we get to that place, is, I thought I would feel differently. I thought I would feel better. And then we have this whole story about how there's something wrong with us because we don't, or how we're just like this inherently negative person, or how we can't relax. I hear so many women in this community talk about regretting their pregnancy because they didn't get to feel like they enjoyed it because they were so worried the entire time, because they believed the lie they would or should feel better once they got pregnant, or once they knew the pregnancy was progressing well and the baby was healthy. They didn't do anything wrong. It's just that they bought into a lie that pretty much everyone in the world believes. It'll be better when. So say it with me. It's not better, but different. Life is 50-50. You've probably heard me talk about that concept before. I honestly can't remember if I've done a standalone episode on that topic, but the basic premise is that 50% of the time, life is going to feel great or neutral. Neutral is also a positive feeling, right? It's going to feel full of all these emotions that we chase: calm, joy, happiness, positivity, excitement. And 50% of the time, it's going to be hard: pain, anger, resentment, jealousy, grief. A lot of people want to fight me about those percentages, but when everything comes out in the wash, it's 50-50. So when I say it's not better, but different, I don't mean that getting or staying pregnant isn't amazing. I mean that it's not only amazing. It's not just amazing. That it's still 50-50. It being amazing doesn't take away our anxiety or our insecurity. It doesn't take away the pain or the grief that we've experienced up until that point. So it's different. Having that baby is amazing, and it's really freaking hard, harder than any of us could ever imagine before we get into it. Both things are true. It's not better on one side or the other. It's just different. That feeling of urgency wants you to believe that getting to that other place is going to feel better. But I assure you it won't. It will feel different. You will get to experience maybe unbridled joy and fear, excitement and anxiety, which, pro tip, those actually feel the exact same in our body, mostly. Our brains can't actually tell the difference between excitement and anxiety. What determines that for us is, ding, 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 you guessed it, our thoughts about the situation. So the two big takeaways from today is, one, I want you to spend a little time in your body and notice what urgency feels like for you. Where do you feel it in your body? How would you describe it? What does it make you want to do? Once you have that, you have a blueprint to refer to, one that you can use over and over again to help you recognize the emotion. When you're able to recognize it, name it, you will then be able to change your experience of it. You will be able to slow down. The next thing, I want you to do some paper thinking. Now, if you're new here, that's what I call journaling. Ask yourself, why do I think it will be better on the other side of this? What am I expecting to feel or hoping to feel once I get to the other side? What am I feeling right now that I don't want to feel or that I'm trying to avoid feeling? Because ultimately it comes down to not wanting to feel how you're feeling right now. For those of you in the I'm running out of time camp, maybe the feeling you're trying to avoid is regret. Maybe you regret not starting sooner or going to the doctor or starting treatment sooner. I have a client that this thought consumes her. It consumes her. She ruminates on this thought all of the time. I should have started sooner. I should have done some sort of fertility preservation or frozen my eggs a decade ago. And yet when we talk about what she was doing a decade ago, having a baby was nowhere near front of mind. Hell, it was barely in the periphery. She's holding herself to an expectation at a time when the expectation didn't even occur to her. She's beating herself up over a decision she didn't even know she would want to consider in 10 years' time. Like, if you're wondering why I've spent an entire podcast talking about this, it's because none of this serves you. All of this time scarcity makes you feel absolutely awful. It doesn't motivate you. It just keeps you feeling stuck. And there's a different way to do this. So again, going back to the big takeaways. I'm sorry, I got off on a little bit of a tangent, purely out of love for you all, but do some paper thinking. If you're new here, again, that's what I call journaling. Ask yourself, why do I think it will be better on the other side of this? What am I expecting to feel once I get to the other side of this? What am I feeling now that I don't want to feel and I'm trying to avoid feeling? Then allow yourself to feel that. Do the now process. Name it, open up to it, and witness it. Urgency will not help you get to a place where you feel better. Sure, you can white knuckle it, but why? White knuckling feels awful, feels very out of control. You can get to the same place without being a jerk to yourself and barking at the people you love. You can still get to that place with genuine love and compassion for yourself and the understanding that it will be different, not necessarily better. All of it is beautiful. All of these emotions are necessary. We don't have to avoid them. They're not going to hurt us. They are an experience for us to have. Okay, that is what I have for you today, my beautiful friends. I hope you have a beautiful day and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of IVF This. If you like what you've heard, click subscribe and follow to make sure you don't miss an episode. And if you want to learn more, head over to www.ivfthiscoaching.com to learn how to work together.